You ever watch those B-movies where the city is swallowed up by the earth? Today we have a real-life story of a disaster that happened just like that. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. On May 4th, 1971, a low that covered most of Quebec province brought relentless rain for 3 consecutive days. On the surface, you'd think, okay, so? But that triggered the disappearance of a whole community. This day in weather history. The area near the Saguenay River experienced these abnormally heavy rains in April, and the clay soil beneath the town of about 1,200 people was saturated with water. Oh, okay, so to be fair, the soil was already weak from the spring thaw, okay? So let's just start there. Therefore, when you factored in this much rain over this consistent period of time, it led to a total destabilization of the ground structure. This resulted in a major landslide that struck the community of Saint-Jean-Vianney, found way up north in Quebec. That's actually about 200 kilometers north of their capital city of the same name. But here's the thing. Residents and town officials were unaware of this particular variety of clay upon which the city was seated. They did not know that it could liquefy under excessive stress. So, to start, what does liquefy mean? Quite honestly, it means exactly what you'd think. On May 4th at about 10:45 p.m., part of the town dropped 30 meters. Yeah, you heard me right. It dropped. And 30 meters is a deep drop, by the way. Imagine the deep end of a swimming pool. Most people would need scuba gear to go 30 meters down in water. This was now a crater, and it cut out something that was 300 meters across and more than 30 meters deep. It created a deep channel through which a river of liquefied clay flowed, and it swallowed 30 homes, 15 cars, and a bus. A total of 31 people were killed, most of whom were trapped in their swallowed homes or cars. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there is also the daily podcast video short. They are shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. One survivor, a Mr. Francois Richard, told what is possibly the single most stereotypical Canadian story of all time to come out of this tragedy. You see, when asked by a reporter where he was when this calamity unfolded, guess what he said? You would have guessed right if you said he was in his living room watching the hockey game when he heard commotion outside. I know, right? But it's a true story. He said that he stepped outside to see what was happening, and about a half kilometer down the road, he was stopped cold and horrified when he witnessed houses falling into the crevasse one by one. In another eyewitness account, a very fortunate woman survived by crawling onto the roof of her car after it had fallen into the crater. Sadly, the tragedy far outweighed the triumphs, as many families were tragically trapped in the liquid mud, which then solidified, taking them with it. In the end, the town was abandoned, never to be returned to, and many of the survivors moved to Arvida. The accounts of today sound like something out of the Twilight Zone, I know, but this really happened this day in weather history. Hey, do you like the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. We are in the final month of year 1. May 31st marks the 365th episode of this podcast, and I gotta tell you, we are wicked excited about it. But to have an even better year 2, we need you. Go right now to wherever you are listening to me right now and rate us, if you would please. It's on a 5-star rating system, and we love as many stars as you can afford. Rate us, but then please also review us. This way we can always stay on top of how you would like to see the show evolve. And there has been a sharp evolution since we started already. Then remember to subscribe to the podcast. Click the subscribe button right there on the very same podcast homepage you're listening to me right now. You'll be immediately reminded that the next day is ready to listen to, and you'll also have access to every episode in the archives. And like I said, it dates back to June 1st of 2020, so we have a lot to get caught up on. Tomorrow is May 5th. and this was the night the moon disappeared. I know it's one Twilight Zone episode after another, but again, I beg you, it's true. Remember our space and science writer, Scott Sutherland, whom I mentioned would shun me if I ever made a May the 4th remark? Well, he takes the lead on tomorrow's story, so you definitely have to be here for that. On This Day in Weather History, with guest host Scott Sutherland and me, your host, Chris May.